Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is August 2nd, 2023, and have I got a fantastic episode for you today. We are going to be joined by horror and comic book author Francesca Maria, and we had such an incredible conversation. You are going to love this. She is so much fun. We talked about her horror story collection. We talked about her comic book collection. We talked about her experiences owning a comic book store in California for many, many years, and all of the Comic Cons that she has been to, and so much more. If you are a comic book fan or a horror fan at all, you're going to love this conversation. Now, we have a brief spot in here where she and I both mentioned that we grew up in haunted houses. I mean, actively haunted houses. Now, most of the conversation that we had around this, I edited out because I'm going to save it for October 25th. It's going to be part of my Halloween special episode where you will get to hear the full conversation that we had about our experiences in these haunted houses. Now, if you don't believe in hauntings, that's fine. This is just stories that we both related to each other on, and we wanted to share them with you. So it doesn't matter if you think hauntings are real or not. They're still fascinating stories to listen to. And they are going to make for a great Halloween episode. So why don't we go ahead and get right to the interview? And as always, stick around to the very end and I will have a few announcements for Burkhart Books and things going on with my world. So without further ado, please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, Francesca Maria. This is an episode that I have been so looking forward to because I have been bugging your publicist for quite a while now to bring me some comic book authors. So when he came up and gave me your name, I was, yes, please connect us. So I am so thrilled to have you here. Could you please tell my audience who you are and what you do?
Sure, of course, Dianne. I'm super excited to be here. So thanks so much for having me on. I am Francesca Maria. I am a horror author, comic book lover, comic book writer. I write fiction, prose, nonfiction. I've got a series of comic books coming out called Black Cat Chronicles, true tales of horror narrated by a mystical black cat. There's 3 issues out so far. Each one has a self-contained story of a true horror. One takes place in a haunted cemetery in Scotland, another in Antarctica during World War II, and then another in Port Chatham, Alaska, this town that goes missing due to Bigfoot stomping in their grounds. And I just put out a collection called They Hide, Short Stories to Tell in the Dark by Britscape Press. And that is my love letter to monsters and all the wonderful things that go bump in the night. 13 stories in there, all to kind of whet your appetite for the dark and the terrifying.
I am so looking forward to reading that one because I bought it and then things happened and I didn't get to read it before we had this interview. But I am such a huge monster fan. I mean, from childhood, the Universal Studios monster movies were my favorite thing in the world. So monster stories are just gold to me.
Yeah. And, I've always loved short stories and I've always loved anthologies. I've been drawn to those books. My bookshelf is littered with volumes dedicated to just vampires, just werewolves, just zombies. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved different artists and different writers take on kind of a well-worn trope and seeing it from another perspective, getting another view of, oh, that's a weird, cool way to do a werewolf, a werebear or a were-raven, or, mm-hmm. not just a werewolf. And so I've always been inspired when I read those anthologies, like, what would my witch story look like? What would my werewolf be? What would my vampire be? And so my collection is my attempt to try to get my take, my flavor, my perspective on some of these monsters that, we all grew up with and know and love. And they're around for a reason. They've stood the test of time because they speak something about our true human nature. You know, the werewolf is all about containing that monster within and kind of battling your own appetites, kind of going against your own nature. And, you know, I could go on and on and on about the monsters, but it's really, at the end of the day, the reflections of us and our own humanity. And what does that mean? And how does that look when you kind of try to write a new story and put it on the page?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I always love about those stories is whenever you delve a little bit deeper, it does say something about society in general. It's not just a monster story usually.
That's right. Yeah. And, you know, my tagline for the book is like, who are we if not for the monsters that we keep? You know, our monsters that we have in society is a direct reflection of our own selves, you know, our own fears, our own shadows. And what does that say about us?
I love that. What kind of tropes do you have in your anthology?
Oh, I've got them all. I've got a witch story that takes place in kind of a traditional Salem type 1600s. I've got a vampire story that's kind of 1800s Ireland. I've got a werewolf story that's, again, kind of 16th century French Loire Valley. I've got a modern 2000s, let's say, circus story, clown story that takes place in New Jersey. I've got a ghost story that, again, is kind of a modern take on a missing person. The story around that is a little girl's playing in a playground and she goes down a slide and doesn't come out the other end. And so it's an epistolary story of different police reports and journal entries of what happened to this little girl. I've got even cowboys and aliens. I've got wendigos. I've got demons, of course, a couple of different demons in there. I've got Lucifer. He makes a little cameo. I've got mermaids. I've got the Mothman. I mean, you name it. I try to check off all the boxes.
That sounds fabulous. I love Mothman stories.
Yeah. Yeah. That one was really fun to write, actually.
Now, is this the one that you were working into an audiobook?
Yeah, it's out now. It just came out in June. So the audiobook is now live. I've got some really talented actors that did the stories for me. I've got a female actor and a male actor. The male actor is Spencer Dillahay, and the female actor is Lucy Kay from Spirit Voices. And they're not together, meaning they don't work on the same story. So there's some of the stories that are female driven that just the female actor does. And then some of the stories that are male driven is just the male actor. So it's not like a radio play or anything. They just kind of basically take turns telling unique stories.
I like that. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Something that I'd read, I think on your website, that you had actually put together the audiobook through a Kickstarter campaign.
I did. Yeah. So our comic book series, we do each of those issues is a Kickstarter. It takes a lot of capital to do a comic. It's more than you would think. We outsource our artists and printing costs and all that good stuff. It adds up pretty quick. So I found that Kickstarter has been really good, not just to help financially, but also to help spread the word about our project and to get people that we wouldn't have otherwise found excited about it. And so when it came time to do the audiobook, so I, as the author, I own the rights to the audiobook, where my publisher owns the printing rights. And I've always loved audiobooks. You know, when I'm going on walks or hikes or whatnot, I'm even just cleaning the house, I like having an audiobook to listen to kind of help pass the time. And so I always wanted to have my collection, see what it sounded like, have it read out loud. And so we did a Kickstarter to help a little bit with the financials, but mostly to just spread the word that we've got this project out there, and also to kind of help introduce the two actors that we got on for the project as well. And so it was really successful. We hit all of our goals, hit all of our deadlines. And like I said, now I'm happy to say that it's out on Audible and available.
That's one thing I don't think people realize is how much it actually costs to produce one audiobook. I mean, thousands of dollars.
It's a lot. Yeah. And it depends on, you need an engineer, you need an editor. It's not just the voice actors. The voice actors also have their own equipment, their own editing software that they need. And so there's a lot of back and forth. And so it's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort. But honestly, this is my first go at it for an audiobook. And Spencer kind of took over as the project manager, and he was phenomenal. He was so easy. He helped me set up everything and taught me what I needed to do on ACX, which is what you do for Audible. And it just went really, really smooth.
Yeah, that was one of the things with me being here in Germany. For some reason, you cannot upload things to ACX from outside of the United States. So I
Yeah,
haven't been able to do audiobooks yet.
that's too bad. Yeah, I know that there's some issues. I can only get UK and United States promo codes to send
Hmm.
out to reviewers. They don't do it international, and I don't really
Yeah.
understand that.
I know it's like there are people here in Germany who would like to listen to audiobooks.
Of course. Yeah, I'm sure all over the place. Yeah.
What is it that appeals to you personally so much about horror?
Oh, that's such a great question. There's a lot of things. I grew up in a haunted house. I legit scary door slamming, opening, lights going on and off, scratching inside the closets, dolls opening their eyes, phantom footsteps, like you name it. Like we had a poltergeist type house and we never talked about it growing up. It wasn't something that my family being super religious just kind of ignored. Like my parents ignored us kids and were told not to talk about it because we were just scaring each other.
Hmm.
And so I didn't have an outlet to process what I was feeling. So at the age of 6, when I first learned how to read and write, I wrote my first horror story.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was about a group of kids who stumble onto a haunted house at the end of a cul-de-sac. And the story I wrote was pretty impressive. It was like 10 pages long. I basically walked the kids through how to survive it.
Hmm.
And in that process, kind of helped myself process what I was going through with the real life haunting in the house that I was living in. And so, that's one major component why I was drawn to some of the darker elements in life. But also, there's alcohol abuse in the childhood home I grew up in. I was also exposed to a lot of horror early on. My oldest sister is 10 years older than me. She used to babysit me and they would rent Faces of Death. I don't know if you remember that movie. And I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I was like within earshot. And I think hearing that was worse than probably seeing what was on screen. And so
Yeah.
that filled my little impressionable head with a lot of things. I read Stephen King's Salem Lot probably when I was 11, and that completely opened up my world to the world of horror. I always loved Nancy Drew and Girl Friday solving mysteries of the ghost and the witch under the stairs. Yeah, that was always my jam. And so a lot of different things influenced my love of horror, and it's only grown as I've gotten older.
Oh my gosh. I feel such a connection to you right now because I actually lived in an actively haunted house myself for like 16
Oh,
years.
wow.
And I mean, you could just see things moving on their own and
Yeah,
lights were going on and off. Things would turn on that should not be turning on.
right. But so then what that's like to live in that environment where it's completely unpredictable. You're
Hmm.
always looking over your shoulder, afraid of the dark shadows, afraid of the long walk to the bedroom. At least for me, it felt like the longest walk
Hmm.
ever, having to go to bed by myself in that long, dark hallway at the end of the house. For me, I think the worst part was the feeling I would get.
Yeah.
The haunting in our house was oppressive. It was like I never ever felt alone
Hmm.
and I never ever felt safe. It wasn't until we moved to a different house when I was 14 that I was like, oh, this is what it means to feel alone. I had no
Yeah.
idea.
I remember the very first day that I walked into that house, I was 13.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute that I stepped over the threshold into the house, it felt like a weight just hit my chest. I'm like,
Yep.
nope, I don't want to live here. This place is bad.
Yep.
And my parents
Yep.
like, no, you're 13. You don't want to go to a new school. You don't want to leave your friends. I'm like, nope, this is not a good place. We need to not come here.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
parents like, no, it's just your imagination. And I'm like, whatever. I know what I'm talking about. I can feel it. This is not a good place. And
Yeah.
if you talk to my dad, nothing ever happened to that house. But you talk to my mom or my sister, and they have got a list of stories for you. And my niece, who was a baby in that house, if you mention that house to her, she cannot talk about it, but she will start crying immediately
Wow.
because she
Wow.
was just so traumatized by that house.
Yeah. And same with my parents, if you ask them, they say there's nothing going on in that house. But all of us, my siblings, we all have different stories. So yeah, again, it was seeing it from an adult perspective now. It's fascinating to see how the mind can try to rationalize everything away. And that's exactly what my parents did.
Do you think these experiences kind of drew you in as a way to explore those experiences in the horror realm?
Yeah, for me, it's more of a survival mechanism. It's more of a cathartic tool. When you are forced to be in your fear all the time, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so, writing about horror, immersing myself even more into it gives me more tools on how to deal with it. And so, like the example of when I wrote a story when I was 6, I was trying to find a way for me to process what I was going through and writing about how to survive it. I find that when you face your fears, when you hang out in the shadows, when you hang out in those dark places, they're not as scary, or at the very least, they don't have as visceral a grip on you as they did if you kept them at arm's length.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah. And I went back to that same muscle memory with my collection. So the They Hide collection came out of my fears around COVID. Some of those stories predate it by a decade or more, but I really got serious about writing it during 2020 because I was completely terrified about what was happening. And a lot of the themes that came out of it were themes of powerlessness, themes, lack of control. There's no pandemic stories in there, but the feeling I think that we had through 2020 in the early days, you can feel that in some of the stories that came out. So it was my way of working through it, through putting pen to paper.
See, and I love that though, because I think you can use so many different monsters for metaphors for things that we all live through.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I finished one story, the witch story. And then when I was done with it, because I'm a pantser, I'm not a plotter. So I figure out the story when it's all over, and then I go back and edit it and pretend like I knew what I was doing in the first place. But when I finished the witch story, I'm like, oh my God, that's like my fears around the patriarchy. And I had no idea until it was done. So it's very kind of revealing too, in a way, of what I was going through that might be just below the surface that I wasn't fully conscious of.
Now, have you ever tried to be a plotter?
I have a nonfiction book. I do holistic healing work and I plot that. And that was really hard. But that was not fiction. So I have not really sat down and tried to plot fiction before, because I'm also more into short stories and even flash fiction, which is kind of 1,500 words or less. But if I was to commit to a novel, I would probably need to have a little more structure than just winging it.
I actually write this historical fiction series, and I have tried so many times to plot this thing out. And usually about halfway through, I'm typing along and my characters are just, no, we're not doing that. Yep. It just veers off and it doesn't end up anything like I had actually written down for the plot.
Totally. Yeah. And for me, some of the stories in They Hide, they're like little mini novellas with like 20,000 words by themselves. I had an idea of where I wanted to go, but really the story took over. The characters took over. Like at moments, I felt like I was just possessed, just writing what they were telling me to do. So I didn't feel like I had any control over the story. It just kind of took off on its own.
One of the ways that I usually try to explain it to people, because the first book that I wrote, it was just completely stream of consciousness. I didn't write anything down for a plot. But it's more like I'm just watching a movie in my head and I'm transcribing it for people.
Exactly. That's right. Yep. Same. Similar.
Yeah. And there's some people that I try to explain that to, and it's like, that's not how it works for me. And I'm like, and I can't understand how it works for them either.
No.
It's like, because I have a lot of friends who are very serious plotters and I don't see how they do it. And they don't see how I do what I do either. It's funny that here as authors, we can be so far apart when we're doing the same kinds of things.
All of us are different. All of us kind of approach the art a little bit from a different perspective.
With your Black Cat Chronicles, you are the author, but you have to work with an artist. How does that collaboration work?
Right. Yes. A very, very talented artist by the name of Nate Olson. It's kind of like writing a screenplay with stage directions. And so the way that the writing is different is I really have to visualize it, visualize the scenes, visualize the pacing. And so these particular comics are true stories of horror. So it's not like I can pants this because there's a lot of research that goes into it and it's historical. So there's a lot of chronological stuff that happens. And so I write basically a page at a time. The first page I might break up into a couple different panels, and the black cat is our mystical figure that narrates it, kind of like the crypt keeper from Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah.
And kind of takes you through each scene. And so I will write in a different color the stage directions, like scene 1, the cat is looking down on a fishing hole in Alaska. It's a gray day. It's cloudy. There's smoke coming off the back of the cat's tail. And then in a different color, I'll write the actual dialogue like, hello, reader. Welcome to another issue of Black Cat Chronicles. And that's where the black cat's voice comes in. And so I'll intermix dialogue with stage direction. And sometimes I'll be really specific, like this should be 5 panels. I want you to break up this page into 5 different scenes. Here's what I want you to have in each scene. Or sometimes I'll be a little bit more loose because Nate's a phenomenal artist and say, this is a splash page, meaning it's a full page or 2 pages. Here's the mood I want it to convey. Here are the basic bones I want it to have, but just go nuts. Go with as creepy or as dark as you want to get. Here's some reference photos for you, but go nuts and have some freedom here to create what you think would work well with the story here.
Now, have you been to any Comic-Cons with your work?
I have, yeah. Previous to publishing this comic, I was a comic book retailer with my husband for 19 years. We own a comic book store called Black Cat Comics. And so we went to a number of conventions as retailers for 20 some odd years. San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, Emerald City Comic-Con. Since we published our own comic, we've been going to the same conventions, but now not as retailers, as publishers. I just got back from StokerCon. I'm going to be doing another local con. We're going to do WonderCon, EmeraldCon. So there's a lot of different conventions that we started to kind of take the comic book to. And it's gotten really, really great feedback, well reviewed. Every time we go to a convention, we sell out of all the issues we bring. People are just absolutely in love with it. I think it's because, honestly, the art is phenomenal. The story's okay. I can say that because I'm the writer. The story's all right. But the art's phenomenal, but the stories themselves are just, they're gripping because they're true. Like, It's so weird that all of these things happen and there's historical fact. Like, I can point to newspaper articles. Like, it's not just me making it up. And our tagline is truth is scarier than fiction. And it really is. And so it's so much fun to just like go in and do the research for some of these areas and some of these stories, because I might have an idea of what happened, but as I go in and do the research, there's just more and more and more stuff that shows up that's even weirder than I could have ever imagined.
Just as a little side note, in case you're planning new Comic-Cons to venture to, Comic-Cons are huge here in Germany.
Oh.
They have them all the time.
Awesome.
I mean, seriously, they have like HorrorCon, they have VikingCon, they have Comic-Con. They have 2 of those every year. I mean, there's just tons. They have one that's just the Salvatore Brothers Con from the Vampire Diaries.
No kidding.
It's a con that's just Vampire Diaries. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, so
Awesome.
It's a big deal here in Germany. And I bet you would sell out very fast, probably the first day.
Nice. All right. I will make a mental note. Yeah, I will totally do that. Thank you for the tip.
My husband and I were big nerds for stuff like that. We go to as many as we possibly can. So we can tell you exactly where they all are.
Oh, great.
Because we're on all the mailing lists.
And they're so much fun, whether you cosplay or not, panels, looking at stuff, you're never at a loss for stimulus or entertainment at a con. Over the years, so again, we've been going to conventions 25, 26 years now. And when we first started going to like Comic-Con in San Diego, there'd be like 1 out of every 500 people might have had some kind of cosplay, but it was very homemade, very crafty. Mm-hmm. Now you go and it's like, especially if it's like the day of the masquerade ball, it's like 25% or more people are dressed up and they've spent all year on their costumes. They've got high tech lights. They've got, sharpened edges. It's just, they're perfect. And I love the ones that are mashups like Spider-Man and Wolverine or, right? Like when they combine different things, like San Diego, you can probably find it on Instagram. There's a Barbie Batman with the Batmobile, and she's just phenomenal. She's just like dressed to the hilt. It must have been sponsored by like Warner Brothers or something because it was just so perfect. And the Batmobile drove, like she drove down the main street in San Diego in a Barbie Batmobile. It was just absolutely incredible.
So cool. I would love to see that. Now, with you writing all of these stories about monsters, have you ever thought about creating your own creature?
Ooh, yes. The first story, even though it's a witch story, spoiler, there's another monster that comes out of that. And it's very, very loosely based on a Native American monster. But I've kind of created my own take on it, my own visual of it, my own reason for its being, and my own reasons for its purpose. And that was really, really fun to create. And it got so ingrained in my psyche when I was writing it that I would have nightmares about it. So it was scary enough for me when I was creating it that it kind of infiltrated my dreams at night.
So you actually kind of brought it to life for yourself.
Yeah. Or it just kind of possessed me, however you want to look at it.
So now this is the point of the show that I usually try and do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I still keep doing it anyway.
Okay. Sounds good.
The question 1, what is your favorite mixed drink, whether it's alcohol or non-alcohol?
I'm going to say Captain Morgan, spiced rum, and ginger ale.
Oh, nice combination. That sounds good.
Yeah, they're refreshing, and it's light. It's not heavy, and it doesn't give me a headache. So I'm all in for that.
Yeah, the headache part's very important.
Correct. That's right.
Question 2, what is your favorite horror cult or classic movie?
I don't know if this counts, but I'm going to use it anyway. I love me some Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I just love all of it. The juxtaposition of the goth with the suburban area, the haunted castle at the end of the suburban lane, Johnny Depp's sad, dark, cure-like persona to Winona Ryder's innocent, perfect suburbia teenager. I love everything about that movie.
I think that definitely fits in with cult classics.
Okay, good.
Question 3. What is your favorite comic universe?
Oh, Batman, easily. I just turned 50, and my goal for probably the last 15 years is by the time I turn 50 to write Batman. And I've still got 300 days left to be able to get that wish to come true.
But now with Batman universe, do you have a specific Batman storyline that you really like?
Oh, Tom King's take on Batman. He did this beautiful arc. I can't remember if it was 50 issues or more, with Catwoman and Bruce Wayne marrying her and not marrying her. He did this thing called Jokes of War and Riddles with the Riddler working with the Joker against Batman. And that was just like pure Batman perfection. Batman to me has always been about the rogues gallery, and Joker is on top of that echelon. And so any good Joker story I'm in, and Tom King's take on that, I mean, it's masterful.
We know that I think that one of the things that's so great about Batman is, like, unlike superheroes, anybody could be Batman.
That's right. That's right. He's not bitten by radioactive spider. He's not from another planet. He is us, just with a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
and really smart.
And ticked off.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And that's one of the reasons why I think Harley Quinn is one of my favorite characters out of Batman.
Yeah.
Because the way she starts out and the way her character twists through the whole universe with the things that happen to her. And that's one of the things that I like about Batman is even the villains, there's something about them that makes you understand why they are the way they are.
Right.
Even though you think they should probably be put in Arkham Asylum.
Yeah. You know, I think Harley Quinn is Paul Dini's greatest work. He's the creator of Harley Quinn, and it came from the Batman animated series. Him and Bruce Timm kind of co-created, but that character is all Paul Dini's brainchild. And the fact that she was the Joker's psychologist and super duper smart, and then got enamored with and wrapped within the spider web that is the crazy of Joker and became like him, but still maintain her intelligence. She wasn't crazy. She chose that path for herself, looking at it from an intellectual, but also being madly in love with this crazy person. She's a very complicated character. I'm not super happy what they did to her in the movie Suicide Squad and stuff. She's got so many more dimensions than that. But, you know, what Paul Dini created and what some of the other comic book writers and artists have done with her have been just phenomenal.
One of the things that I find interesting about her too is it kind of speaks to the fascination that so many women have with true crime.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
so many women do come out as being truly fascinated by that. And I can't poo-poo that because I have a degree in forensic criminology and studied profiling.
So, yeah, this is a hot tip for you if you don't know about it already. There was a take on her recently, in the last 5 years, called Joker and Harley. I think that's the name of it. Criminal Minds or something. And it's a prestige format that DC Comics put out under their black label. And I want to say it was 5 issues. And it's Harley as the profiler getting pulled in on these murders that the Joker is doing. And it is beautifully done. The artwork is just absolutely phenomenal. And the writing is just, I mean, if you like true crime and you like Harley, that's going to be right up your alley.
Oh, yeah. I got to check that out. Definitely. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? Which question?
I don't even remember what that question was.
I think that was question 3. Yeah.
Okay.
Question 4. This is why it never ends up being quick because I get off track. Who is your favorite horror author?
You know, he might not like me saying this, but Neil Gaiman. I know people see him more as fantasy, but a lot of the stuff he does is horror.
Yeah.
If you look at Coraline, if you just look at Sandman, if you haven't read it, but now you've seen the series, a lot of that is very horrific. And so he's my favorite writer, period. And because he does a lot of horror in a way that I emulate and admire, I would say Neil Gaiman.
And number 5, what is your favorite horror trope to write?
Oh, that's like asking me to choose my favorite children. Favorite horror trope to write. In my collection, I think I went more, because I grew up real strict Catholic. I have more demon and demonic stories than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so my guess would probably be, perhaps it's my favorite, but maybe my go-to in a lot of ways, because that's what really scares me, is thinking that there might be possibly demons that exist. So I'll say the dark demonic type stuff.
Very cool. Did you want to read from one of your books?
I would be happy to. Let me see. Yeah, I've got a short paragraph. It's from the last story in They Hide called The Gathering. On the longest night of the year, when the moon is at its peak and the cool, crisp chill of winter whips through the dead trees, ghouls and goblins gather for their annual meeting. None of them can remember when they first gathered or whose idea it was. For as long as the seasons existed, they find their way back to the small hollow at the edge of the world where all things began.
That is so cool.
That's it. That's it. And so the premise of that is like a bunch of stories within a story where ghouls and goblins gather to talk about their human horror stories for the year. Like what was the worst experience you had with your human this year and what happened to you? And so it's all told from the perspective of the ghouls and the goblins. And there's a prize at the end. There's a third, second, first prize for whoever tells the best story. And so there's about 10 stories within that last major story at the end of the book.
That is so going to be the next thing that I read.
Awesome. It was really, really fun to write. And that's why I try to sneak in all the other horror tropes that I didn't have room for in the previous stories. So I just like slammed them all in there towards the end.
I tell you, that's one of the things that I absolutely love about doing all of these interviews with authors is I find some of the best books that become like my favorite things in my shelves. And I never would have found them if it hadn't been for doing these interviews.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's always fun to discover new authors. That's why I love anthologies, because it's a bunch of different authors, some of which I know, but a lot of them I don't. So it's a great way to discover new writers to me and new favorites.
Now, is there anything that you think that is important for the listeners to know that we have not covered?
Oh, let's see. As a horror writer, I try to go to places that are dark and scary in a safe environment so that we can feel stronger from coming out the other end, more empowered from that experience, And also, God forbid, if horror does enter our lives, we might have some ideas or tools on how to deal with it by being immersed in fiction. And so my goal is not to make the world darker. My goal is to actually bring more light by showing what the dark is.
I love that. That is a great message. And I'm going to make sure that all of your contact information is in the description of the podcast, and it will also be on our website for as long as we have the podcast going. So no matter when somebody finds your episode, they will be able to find you.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I cannot thank you enough for this. This has been absolutely wonderful. You are fascinating. I love talking to you.
Oh, ditto. And we should do this more often. Anytime you want to like geek out on comic book stuff, you just give me a call. I'm happy to do it.
Don't tip me. You're going to be sorry with that one.
No, for sure. You know, I made a lot of friends after doing podcasts. Like I still keep in touch with a lot of my podcasters because we can't get off the phone. We find more things to talk about. So, you know, feel free to anytime reach out if you want to chat.
God, this has been absolutely fabulous. You are fun.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. You are fun too.
So there you have my interview with the incredible Francesca Maria. Please check out the links in the description of the podcast and go check out her work. It is just amazing. You're going to love it. If you have any kind of affinity for horror or comic books, she is probably going to be your new favorite author. Now, don't forget, there was a large portion of this interview that I cut out that I will be airing on October 25th for our Halloween episode. We had an incredible conversation about what it was like growing up in actively haunted houses. And it doesn't matter if you believe in hauntings or not. These are great stories that you are going to want to hear. So mark your calendars and come back on October 25th, and I will announce this again later. Don't worry. We will have our Halloween episode on October 25th with Francesca Maria. Now, we do have a few things that are going on with Burkhart Books. I will actually finish my edits of Into the West Family Ties today. I only have 2 more chapters. It will get done. I can manage that. It will be finished today. I am so excited. So after I finish them today, I'm going to send them to my beta readers, and hopefully by the end of the weekend, I will have their notes back and I'll be able to make the corrections. And next week, it will go to my editor, Greg Wood. Once those corrections are all made, I will be publishing the book. I'm trying to decide if I want to go ahead and publish it in September or if I want to hold it until the 1st of October to bring it out at the same time as our new magazine, Book Banter Magazine. If you have an opinion on this, feel free to drop me a line. Let me know what you think I should do with that, if I should stagger them out or drop them both at once. I'm going to take probably about a week off of everything book related just to recharge my batteries because I am so exhausted. Then whenever I get back, I am going to finish the plotting for the next 2 books that I have. They're halfway plotted. I want to do a little bit more work on those. And this is definitely an experiment for me because if you've listened to my podcast, you know I am not a plotter. I am a decided pantser. And so this is going to be a true experiment for me to see if I can do a book based on a plot that I created. But I bought some plotting software, and hopefully this is going to help me stay a little bit more on track for things and be a little bit more organized because I do spend a lot of time searching my notes for information. So this will keep things a little bit more at my fingertips so I don't have to spend so much time hunting for information while I'm writing. The magazine is coming along well and should be ready to go by October 1st. I'm finding some great information to put in there. It's going to be really fun, book related, have a few crafts, maybe have a few recipes, you know, just try and make it a really nice, well-rounded publication. And it's going to be all holiday themed for Halloween. I'm really looking forward to doing this. I love Halloween. Unfortunately, that is not a big holiday here in Germany. I really miss American Halloween. I used to go all out. I was the house that people would bring in vans of kids from other neighborhoods just to hit our house because we would give away the yard-long pixie sticks or the king-size candy bars. There was one year we gave out helium balloons with a bag of candy tied on the end with little toys in it. We always went crazy for Halloween, and I really miss that. So doing this magazine and having a special podcast episode for Halloween is going to be my way to celebrate. But I think that's enough information for today. So you know what that means, folks. It's that time for you to go forth and be happy that Halloween is just around the corner.